Welcome to Business Class Live. We introduce you to really the brightest minds shaping our digital future. And of course, we want to discuss the industry's most important topics together with you. You have the ability, of course, to comment and to ask us a question here during our live stream, live session. And of course, we want to answer all your questions that you have. And today's topic is really a topic that is all about the future, because it is about artificial intelligence. A topic that made, during the last couple of years, a lot of progress. And of course, some have also a little bit of skepticism when it comes to artificial intelligence. And of course, the idea of humans, that robots could one day ruling the world, is a plot of many Hollywood movies. But however, this is not science fiction anymore, and so I'm very glad that we have Professor Dr. Christoph Lütge from the University in Munich as our guest, who is really one of the artificial intelligence experts, and especially that's our topic today when it comes to ethics in artificial intelligence. A very warm welcome, Christoph.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And Christoph, you wrote also this book that we have here, Ethic in KI and Robotics, together with some colleagues. And tell us, what was the motivation about this book? Because I assume there are a lot of books around artificial intelligence already, but what is so close to your heart to write down your thoughts?
So I have been working in ethics, and specifically in business ethics, for a long time, for more than 20 years. But now, in the last 1 or 2 years maybe, it turned out to me that AI and other digital technologies are much more interesting to look at for ethical questions. And actually, there are not too many books on AI ethics around yet. So it is something that is still fills a gap in the market, and it will also be out in English, by the way, very soon.
Perfect. And that's just to get you personally a little better to know each other. If you could decide to talk with a robot, would it be a more interesting experience to talk with a human being? Because it's a different experience, maybe?
It depends on the context. So I wouldn't say it's always better to talk to a human being. For example, a robot or a digital assistant never gets bored and never gets angry, except when it's programmed to be. But otherwise it doesn't, and I think that's quite nice. So you can say some things to a digital assistant that you wouldn't say to a human being.
And would you say you're more like a rational type of guy, or also emotional? Because emotion, that's what AI is usually lacking, right?
Well, to some extent. Of course, it's programmed, but it's a huge field now to program something like emotions or emotional reactions into AI systems as well. Also, how to read emotions from human beings, it's a huge field now. So, I mean, I'm not sure. Most people would call me a more rational person. Although I also like to play music, for example, and that's usually not just rational.
I see. And when you think about, typically also the Germans, right? They're towards new things a bit more skepticism is very broadly, I think, here in our German DNA. Are you personally a bit more skepticism or more euphoric about new topics in the future?
Yeah, I would say I'm optimistic. I'm quite optimistic about, at least about this particular technology. Maybe not about everything and every technology, but I also think of what I'm doing as a bit of combating this skepticism and replacing it with a more realistic picture, because the current skepticism that we indeed, as you say, have, and we are witnessing in Germany, but also in some other countries, is a danger, I think, to our future and to the way that we stay on the forefront of innovation. So just recently, actually these days, there was a new autonomous vehicles readiness index which came out, which is repeatedly done every year, and Germany has lost seriously ground in this, dropped from number 8 to number 14, and one of the suggested reasons was this deep-rooted skepticism towards new technologies. So, and while countries like Singapore and South Korea gain ground. And so I think it's important now not to be too pessimistic and too skeptical.
And just to define it a little bit more concrete, when would you call it as a system really intelligent? And when is it just a good algorithm or software? I mean, I think there's a fine line, but I think who, if not you, could explain us where the border is.
Yeah, of course, this would take an entire lecture course to do, and there are different approaches to this question. Also, there are some who say we shouldn't even call this artificial intelligence. We should because it seems to say artificial intelligence should be as close to human intelligence as possible. But this is not necessarily the case. It could be quite different. So the definition for AI that I like to use most is that AI should be able to do three things. And an AI system should be able to correctly interpret external data, learn from these data, and then adapt itself in a flexible way as a reaction to these data. I think that these three moments are quite important, and it's then a bit easier, but that would take longer, how to deline it AI from other mere, for example, big data solutions or other digital solutions. So this is true. This I think a lot that is called AI now would at least traditionally not have been called AI, but that's the way it goes.
And I mean, many maybe also from our audience, when they think about ethics and AI, they're thinking about this famous example, because everyone here in Germany, especially in Germany, likes to drive cars, right? And one day it will be autonomous. And so you're driving on the street, you lost your control about the car. Then it's this famous decision that then, of course, the machine has to make. Will I kill this young child who's playing maybe football on the street, or the senior citizen on the other side who maybe come back from shopping and has to make these kind of horrible decisions? We could make a lot of other examples that are tragically in the same way, but this is one of the things that people have in their mind. How can a machine make these decisions? What is the basis for us? And also, it might make different decisions in different cultures, right? And I think maybe it's a good example where you could guide us a little bit through this topic.
Yes. So there are a number of questions here. So first, I would say, if that is really the case, though, so if an autonomous vehicle, after you as the driver lose control of it, then it is immediately faced with this decision. Then something must be fundamentally wrong. So in more than 99% of the cases, the software will guide the vehicle before the crash.
Even the car is going autonomously. I don't drive and lose control, but it can be a different kind of other car, maybe facing my car, and the car has to go left or right to just go around the obstacle, right? I mean, even if it's autonomous, maybe there's a situation where it has to make a decision to go left or to go right, right? So,
well,
to say protect me as a driver.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that these cars would do is brake as hard, as far and fast as possible, and they would do that much better than any human driver, maybe except for Sebastian Vettel, but I don't know. But so in this way, they would avoid the vast majority of accidents already. So and it is these other situations that you are talking about, these situations of unavoidable accidents. These would be under a very specific set of conditions. So that there is no, for example, the car cannot go to the right or to the left of the road. So it cannot swerve to avoid a person. And you need to be faced with two very hard choices to make. We have been actually. So I was part of the first ethics committee worldwide for autonomous driving, which here did its work actually here in Berlin a couple of years, and we came up with several rules for autonomous driving, and we discussed these questions as well, and we also looked through databases of accidents, which went back decades actually, and it's very, very hard to find even one instance of such similar case. Okay, That being said, still, so if you were faced with such a tragical decision, what should the programming look like? What should programmers write into the code? And first, what we said in this ethics committee was that there must be no distinction based on personal characteristics.
It doesn't matter if it's young or old or man or woman or whatever.
Exactly. And suppose you were even, it would really be possible to detect that digitally. So but so suppose that's possible. So then the software must not decide based on these characteristics. And that's something that other people would like to see, actually. So you mentioned the cultural context. There's a very famous software system called the Moral Machine, which everyone can find on the internet, and it allows you to look at a number of examples for who to kill in these theoretical choices. And the people who were programming this Moral Machine, they collected data from many countries where this was these examples were taken, and it is indeed the case that different cultural backgrounds favor different personal characteristics. So in some countries you would rather say protect the children, which is in most of the countries the case, but in some it's different, rather protect the elderly. And some say, well, and we need to write this into the code. I think this is not possible. I think this just goes against a lot of legal rules, goes against established constitutional rules, and so I don't think this can be done.
But it means the same car, for example, that I have could be when I buy it, for example, in China, and I bring it to Germany, or I buy it in the US and bring it to Germany. It could be the same car, but different kind of software based on the culture. Or you think from an ethical standpoint, it should then, when I want to use it, then you have to play the German version, let's say the German culture version of the software, that my car behaves like it is from ethical standpoints appropriate here in Germany.
So it would have different programs if it were really the case that you would base these programs on such cultural intuitions. Actually, I do not think that is possible at all, because it's unconstitutional, not just in Germany and not just in Europe, but for example, the Indian Chief Court just recently ruled that this is not possible to do, to discriminate against certain parts of the population. So I don't think we will see that. It would be a theoretical possibility.
And today, when you look into our lives, where do you feel AI is already happening, and where you would say, oh, there might be in the future also some ethical questions with it?
Oh, the ethical questions are already there, and that's why a number of companies are approaching us at the Institute for Ethics in AI in Munich. I think some of the areas that, well, first it depends on what you count as AI. So a lot might be challenged whether this is AI, but usually, for example, when you start with a navigation system. A navigation system which you all have on your iPads, iPhones, or smartphones uses AI in a number of ways. For example, by finding out what's the best possible route to a certain destination. Then, where do companies already use AI? So some of the things are in recruiting. So recruiting tools that, for example, assess resumes of applicants. These have certain AI components built into it. Also, filtering of if you have 400 applications and you filter these. Here a lot of AI-based solutions are already being used, and also for example, by banks and financial institutions for assessing creditworthiness. This is something that we see. And something, I mean, we could use many other examples, but one that is in the other countries like the US already being done is, for example, assessing whether someone should receive probation in court. And there judges usually rely, not delegate the decision to these systems, but rely on certain assessments of the data of such a person.
Is it a coincidence that especially Germans are in this kind of privileged role to talk and think about it, as we are more the thinkers and the philosophers and people that are like to read and like to discuss and see the world from different perspectives? Or is it really a coincidence that this topic is really handled here in Munich, in Germany in general, and so many Germans are? And also I think Facebook also made a big kind of donation or to help them to navigate through this difficult field. Or you said it could be also happen in Australia or in South Africa or wherever in the world.
So it's true that Facebook was particularly interested in how is this being seen here in Germany.
Because it was critical, or
certainly because we here in Germany things tend to be seen in a quite critical way with lots of new technologies. But on the other hand, I would also say the ethics of AI is not just being done in Germany. In recent years, and that means roughly maybe 2 years, we have seen a number of initiatives around the world which developed ethical guidelines for AI. So we have the AI for People and the high-level expert group on AI here in Europe, but we have also, for example, in China, we have seen the Beijing Principles for AI late last year. We have seen initiatives in the US and also in other parts of the globe, of the world. So I think that the problems are recognized all over, but it's true that some of the things are seen more critical here than elsewhere.
Do you personally think in the future we have to be also a little bit afraid when it comes to, especially the combination of robotics and AI from an ethical standpoint? I don't talk so much about that they maybe steal our jobs, because I personally believe that of course there will be a kind of coexistence, that they maybe then help us with repetitive tasks and things like that, more like a coexistence where they help us to achieve things that we are maybe even don't want to do. But I mean, how, when we look a bit more in the future and they learn and become smarter, do you think that's I mean, even big thinkers like Elon Musk, etc., are a bit critical about this part, whether maybe could lead to, you need like a UN for ethics and AI? Or?
I have to say, I do not see this as a realistic scenario for the future. I'm not sure what will be in 50 or 100 years, but for the foreseeable future, this is not a realistic scenario. It would assume that we really make steps towards this artificial general intelligence. So far we have
singularity.
The singularity, exactly. So and what we have seen so far is entirely artificial special intelligence in many special domains. These systems are better and far better even than any human being. But they are not steps to artificial general intelligence. We would need to see much more to this end. I know that a number of my colleagues in the US, but elsewhere, like to paint this picture of artificial intelligence becoming this kind of danger.
I disagree.
I have to totally disagree.
But also when it comes to, I mean, for example, quantum computing, it's not so far away, right? We're talking about maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years, but I mean, at least within the 50 years that you say, don't worry.
But the problem is that if you see it that way, then you're basing it entirely on computing power. And AI is not just a matter of computing power. Some of the older generation of AI people, they like to say, oh, this is the recent developments of the last maybe 5, 6 years in machine learning and otherwise. This is just more computing power. You have more computing power, but it's not the real AI. I totally disagree with that, because it overlooks so much. With machine learning, you have been able to achieve ends which were far beyond any reach with traditional AI. And So I'm just saying it's much more complex than computing power. You wouldn't just need a quantum computer, you would need much more. If you ask me about another AI test that someone suggested, I think it was Steve Wozniak, formerly at Apple, said, what would make a system really intelligent? And he suggested it would mean if an AI system, a robot, built into a robot, were able to walk into any house or any apartment and make itself a coffee. That he would see as intelligent, and that's something that it's just not there for the foreseeable future.
And I mean, a lot of AI is already in our household, right? When we're thinking about Alexa or Siri, where there's a lot of kind of very smart algorithms, you could call it AI, I think already. Will there ever be really trust, as we have already with this very basic form of AI issues that people feel, oh, maybe they hear what I'm saying, or what are they doing with my data? I don't know how this is actually programmed, etc. I mean, trust is also for adoption a very, very big issue. Of course, you have to rely also on ethics here, that everything is programmed and the AI will make the decision based on things that you would also have acceptance for as a human being. Talk a little bit about this trust issue.
Yeah, I think trust is the key issue for AI ethics. I would even go as far as saying that AI ethics or ethical guidelines for AI are there to make these systems trustworthy. And this is a term that is being used by companies as well as in the academia, trustworthy AI. If people do not trust in these systems, they would just not use them. And it's the same whether we are talking about autonomous cars or whether we are talking about certain health applications, whether we're talking about the Corona app, which people seem to trust in Germany, or a significant part at least. Although maybe that's not the AI, that's a side story. But in order to achieve this trust, people will need to see that that these systems will adhere to certain principles, adhere to certain rules, and that's why I think ethics is so important. We achieve trust in several ways in other domains as well. So one is law, but I think law and legal guidelines, binding legal guidelines, are still a bit too early to implement now for AI. I think there is a danger that we do this too early and do this prematurely, and we stifle innovation. I think that is a real danger. But we will arrive at regulation at some point. For now, I think it's important to come up with good ethical guidelines, which is not the same as mere self-regulation, but something where, for example, external experts, people from academia, people from NGOs and civil society, do ethics basically in collaboration with the companies who will be implementing these systems.
When we're talking about then also, of course, the following responsibility and liability for robots or AI systems, is this a new business model then for products for insurances, or is it the actual programmer? Is it the CEO of the company? Is it a kind of ethics control gremium that has to approve every AI that goes into the market? And what is your view on that?
That is still open. I think at the moment we do not yet have a consensus what would be the best model for this. So some companies have given themselves ethical guidelines for AI. While this is good, and I wouldn't disagree with that, I think this is not enough. We will need more than that. Some say we will need to create specific positions like a chief AI ethics officer. That may be the case, but I think what will be more important is to actually implement ethics in the real development processes in the companies, and that means when there's a programmer, for example, programming software for an autonomous car, and then many questions turn up in the actual development process. How should the car here in this instance go right or go left? what would be the rule that we should follow. So this input is needed in the real in the development stage, and that means we will need to have these competencies, non-technical competencies in the development stage. And I think this is what companies are also starting to recognize now, and it also will mean new jobs on this stage rather than in the high-level management stage.
We have our first question, and it comes from Christian Wirsching. Thank you, Christian, first of all, for telling us your question. And he is asking, what technical developments do we need to make AI ethical? He means develop explanation techniques for deep learning. So,
yeah. So, as I understand it, he already mentions a very important ethical principle. This is one of the 5 ethical principles that both the AI for People as well as the high-level expert group came up with in 2018. The explanation principle, or explicability, as it's sometimes called, and that is a new ethical principle only for AI, because AI usually has this black box character, and not even developers know why this result came into being. There are now in many fields, especially in informatics, we have a field explainable AI, or XAI in short, but also in this interdisciplinary context, which we do, for example, at my institute, together with social scientists. We're working on how to actually make AI explainable. And that might mean different things in different contexts. So one would be, it means explainable for whom? That question would need to be answered. For example, if we have a doctor who is faced with a certain result of a big data process, a system that assesses the data of a patient, then that doctor needs to see what were the criteria that influenced the result of the AI system. If it's about autonomous driving, then it's usually about ex post, so after the crash or whatever has happened, we will need to have a black box that records all the parameters of driving, and then can tell you what factors influence the actual event. And it's not easy to say what we need from the technical side here. We will need to, and this is already being done. For example, at TUM, we are computer scientists as well as others are working on this. How to find factors that influence a big data result without having to specify what exact path led to this decision, which is often not possible. But you can again, for example, find patterns and see, well, this is more probable that this factor influenced to a more probable extent than others. So it's not very easy to say, yeah? And many people are working on exactly this, but that's the way we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, Christian, I hope that was a very fulfilling answer to your question, and I hope that this is really in-depth inside view, and thank you very much for this view on this very complex topic, and to make it also understandable for our audience. And just a personal question, of course, what kind of AI you wish to have, or maybe you use already, that we should all pay attention to, and how do you think also to your personal everyday life AI will be having influence?
Well, actually, so I like digital assistants a lot, and I'm still, I have to say, I'm still very impressed by the natural language processing that is built into them. So I would like to see more of this. I think a lot more could already be done with natural language processing, and for example, to have even more meaningful conversation with these digital assistants. What we see with other systems, for example, is we see creativity of AI, which is something which people especially in open public discussions, are often still denying that AI can be creative. But for example, if you look at this famous website, this person does not exist, this person does not exist, creates faces of people who do not exist in this very instance. And it's amazing what it can do. And you would not, in most cases, more than 90% of the cases, you wouldn't tell the difference whether this is a real person or not. And that is something which I'm certain will be used in a much wider way in the near future, and not just for pictures or for video, but also for many ways. And so you can create even more of such environments in an artificial way.
Christoph, it was really a super insightful talk, and I think many of our audience hopefully have been now sensibilized for this very important topic. And I think AI will definitely be a topic that, first of all, for sure will not go away, but also will influence our business life, our personal life, also a certain industry sector like health, etc. So it's very sensible, and that will be very thought having here and talking especially about the topic of ethics, because we all need more trust and confidence that people like you and your team that are really deeply thinking for all of us, on behalf of all of us, what it means for us, and bringing all these big corporates in the right direction, that they are for sure helping and improving our lives with the technology, but under an ethical kind of umbrella. So, Christoph, thank you very much for being here and all these insights and answering all these questions for us. And I wish you all the best for your institute and for your team. And good luck also with the book. Hope it will spread, and especially the University English edition, hopefully worldwide also, that there are more thoughtful thinking about this topic. Thanks to the audience. Please follow us on all our channels. Listen to also all of our other episodes of Business Class that you can find on Apple and Deezer and Spotify, on all these usual platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in and for your participation. If you have any more questions, just please go on and comment. I'm sure Christoph will be happy to answer questions. All the best for you. Thanks for tuning in. Greetings from Berlin, your Tilo.